The desert never forgets who bled upon her sand. Somewhere beyond the cracked horizon, where the sky folds itself into a faded bruise, a man rode alone with the weight of ghosts clinging to his shoulders. His name was Elias Kane, and the prairie wind knew it the way it knows the names of the dead. He had once been quicker with a gun than with mercy, a name whispered through saloon doors and wanted posters. But that was 20 years ago, before the fires, before the screams that turned his nights hollow. Now, he was just a rancher tending to dry fences and the slow ruin of memory. The wind rasped over the grass like a blade across bone. He lifted his hat against the glare, saw the smoke of his chimney curling faint and lonely against the violet dusk. That sight was enough to remind him there was still some rhythm left to his living. Feed the horses, mend the gate, pour whiskey at sundown, and try not to think. But the desert remembers what men try to forget. That night, the sky cracked open with thunderless heat. Elias sat on his porch, watching lightning wander over the plains like lost cattle. The smell of rain that never came filled his lungs, and with it came a memory he'd spent 2 decades burying. Fire. Screams. A child's eyes wide with terror and ash. He'd found her near the ruins of an Apache camp, barely alive, her hair singed, her arms covered in soot and blood. She'd tried to crawl away from him, whispering words he didn't understand. He'd holstered his pistol, wrapped her in his coat, and whispered the only truth he knew back then. "Ain't no one dying tonight, little one." He'd hidden her in his wagon, rode 3 nights beneath a moon that felt like judgment. When the cavalry came looking, he lied through his teeth and pointed them east instead of west. Then he left her at a mission school near Santa Fe, told the nun she was kin. He never went back. The sound of hooves broke his thoughts. At first, he thought it was a coyote dragging a carcass across the dust. But then, the steady rhythm of hooves, the silhouette of a rider slicing through the dusk. A woman, tall and steady, her shadow painted in copper by the setting sun. She rode like the wind owed her something. Elias stood slowly, hand drifting to the rifle by the porch rail. Old habits die slower than a man's guilt. The rider dismounted without a word, her boots stirring the dust into small ghosts. She removed her hat. The braid of her black hair gleamed in the low light, a memory made flesh. Her eyes found his, calm as a prayer whispered to the earth. "You're Elias Kane," she said, her voice quiet but certain. "I am," he answered, trying to sound unshaken. The silence between them stretched like the plains, endless, waiting. Then she said it, words that cracked the air clean in two. "Cowboy, I came to marry you." Elias froze. The world narrowed to the curve of her face, the soft rustle of her breath, the ghosts whispering inside his ribs. He saw it now, the trace of a scar beneath her jaw, the small cornhusk doll tied to her saddlebag. And suddenly the years folded back. "You." "Yes," she said. "You saved me. The child from the burning camp." Elias stepped back as though struck. His throat closed around the old dust of regret. "You should have forgotten me." "I tried." Her eyes softened. "But memory is a stubborn river. It runs where it pleases." Inside, the fire crackled, shy and uncertain. She sat by it, hands folded, her presence steady as stone. Elias poured coffee, hands trembling just enough to shame him. "You don't owe me a thing," he said. "I didn't come to pay a debt." "Then why?" She looked up. Her gaze didn't waver. "Because I promised myself, the man who saved me from fire deserved to know he didn't save an ember. He saved a life." She paused, then added softly, "And I came to offer it back." Outside, a coyote howled, a lonely, cracked song that belonged to another century. Elias stared into the flames, their light catching the wet glint in his eyes. He wanted to tell her the truth, that he didn't save her out of goodness, but out of guilt. That he'd once ridden with men who lit that camp aflame. That his hands, not just his heart, were burned black with shame. Instead he said nothing. "You don't marry a man like me," he muttered. "You bury him." A faint smile tugged at her lips, not of amusement but of something older, deeper. Then maybe I came to do both. The room breathed in silence. When she rose to leave for the night, she walked to the doorway and paused. The lantern painted her face in gold and shadow. "You think the desert forgets," she said. "But it remembers kindness too." She walked toward the horizon where the stars began to bloom, her steps slow, deliberate, like someone walking back into her own legend. Elias stood at the porch, watching her fade into the soft hum of cicadas and wind. His heart beat against the years like a locked door rattling its own chain. He whispered into the dark, "Then I reckon she'll be staying a while." And the night, heavy, forgiving, closed in around him like a hand that had finally stopped trembling. Morning came like a bruise healing over the sky. Mist lay across the ranch fields, soft and silver, as though the night had tried to hide the scars of what the world once was. Elias woke before the sun, same as always, but that morning he wasn't alone. Aiyana was already outside, sleeves rolled, feeding the horses as if she had always belonged here. The animals trusted her, even the stubborn gray that once bit anyone who came close. Her movements were quiet, fluid, almost prayerful. Elias leaned against the doorway, coffee steaming in his hand, watching her hum some melody the wind seemed to know. He couldn't place the tune, half Apache, half lullaby. It made the air gentler somehow. "You don't have to work," he said, stepping down from the porch. "Work is what keeps ghosts from talking too loud," she answered without looking back. Her words landed like truth usually does, softly but deep. By noon, they worked side by side repairing the corral fence. Aiyana held the posts steady while Elias hammered the nails, their silence speaking in rhythms the heart could almost mistake for peace. Sometimes their eyes met, not long enough to burn, but long enough to remember something neither could name. When she laughed once, at his clumsy grip on a rope, the sound startled him. It was light, unburdened, the kind of laugh that felt like forgiveness taking its first breath. But the town did not forgive so easily. When Aiyana rode into town for supplies, the whispers started. Women paused mid-step. Men leaned on railings pretending not to look. "Apache woman on Kane's horse," someone murmured. "She come to collect her due," another sneered. At the general store, Deputy Roy, a young man too proud for his boots, blocked her path. "We don't take kindly to your kind playing house with good folks," he said loud enough for the crowd to hear. Aiyana's face didn't move. She looked at him the way the desert looks at fools, still, vast, unimpressed. "Kindness isn't something I've yet found for sale here," she said softly. Then she turned her back to him. The hush that followed was sharp enough to cut the air. When Elias heard of it later, his shame came boiling back. He stormed into the barn, fists clenched, anger turned inward. "You shouldn't have gone alone," he said. "I walked through fire once," she answered, calm as ever. "A few words won't burn me." Her calm disarmed him more than any fight could. He wanted to say, "I was supposed to protect you," but the words died in the ash between them. Days slipped into each other like cards shuffled by the wind. They spoke little, but the silences grew warmer, not colder. Aiyana began planting small wildflowers near the well, stubborn little bursts of color against the pale dirt. Elias watched her do it one afternoon, unsure why it moved him so deeply. "Flowers won't grow here," he said. "They will if something loves them enough to stay." That night, as he poured whiskey by the fire, he caught her singing again, the same desert song but softer now, like it was meant only for the space between them. One evening rain finally came. The kind of hard, steady rain that carries the smell of renewal and regret all at once. They stood beneath the porch roof, watching the drops carve tiny rivers through the dust. "Where did you go after the mission?" Elias asked quietly. She didn't look at him. "East," she said. "I learned to read their books, to speak their words. They taught me to forget my name." "And did you?" She turned, eyes shimmering like wet stone. "No. I remembered it when I heard yours again." Something in him broke open, not like glass shattering but like earth after rain. He wanted to reach for her hand but didn't. Instead he just nodded once, slow, reverent. That night, thunder rolled over the plains. A distant fire glow painted the clouds red. Soon, a rider galloped in shouting. Bandits were raiding ranches west of the ridge. Elias loaded his rifle without a word. Aiyana appeared beside him, strapping on his old revolver belt. "You're not coming," he said. "Then you'll ride without your heart." Her tone wasn't defiance, it was fact, plain as dawn. They rode out together through the black storm of dust and fire. The night flashed in streaks of lightning, silhouettes of riders, gunfire echoing like memory reborn. Elias fought with the precision of a man who'd promised himself he'd never draw again. But fate doesn't honor promises easily. When one bandit's torch hit the barn, flames swallowed the roof in seconds. He ran toward it, instinct not reason, and the world turned red. He stumbled, coughing, choking on smoke. The timbers cracked, the ceiling groaned, and then she was there, her shawl torn, her face streaked with ash. She pulled him out through the fire's scream. Her hands burned, her breath ragged, but her grip did not falter. They fell into the wet dust outside, the rain turning to steam on their skin. Elias tried to rise, but she pressed him down gently. "You saved me once," she whispered, voice shaking. "Now it's even." "No," he rasped. "You saved me twice, once from fire, once from myself." Her eyes closed as she leaned against him, trembling. The rain hissed over the dying flames. The night smelled of smoke and forgiveness. By dawn, the barn was half a skeleton, black beams pointing to the pale morning sky. Elias stood before the ruin, feeling the ache of years, the old fire, the new one, and the woman who refused to let him burn. She came to stand beside him, hand bandaged, quiet. "You keep saving me," he said, voice barely more than breath. She smiled, tired, gentle. "Then let me." That morning, the town would see two silhouettes against the smoke, not savior and saved, not outcast and rancher, but equals standing side by side. The wind had changed direction. The desert at last was listening. The sun rose pale and trembling, as if afraid to touch what the fire had left behind. Smoke still curled from the black ribs of the barn, whispering up into a sky scrubbed clean by rain. Elias stood in the wreckage, hat in hand, every breath heavy with the scent of char and wet wood. But for the first time in 20 years, the air didn't feel like punishment. It felt like a reckoning that had finally passed. Aiyana moved among the ruins quietly, her shawl singed at the edges, her hair damp from the storm. Her burned hand was wrapped in linen, yet she still tended to the horses, murmuring soft words that made even the skittish ones settle. Elias watched her and felt the strangest ache. Not sorrow, not desire, but a kind of awe. The way some men might look at a church that had survived the flood. By noon the town came. Curious eyes, gossip-rumpled mouths, pity sharpened into judgment. Deputy Roy spat into the dust and muttered, "Ranch is half gone and he's still keeping that squaw around." Elias turned slowly, eyes steady as gunmetal. "That squaw saved your town from burning last night," he said, "while you hid behind your badge." The words fell like hammers. No one spoke after that. Even the wind seemed to back away. Then Elias did something he hadn't done since his youth. He straightened tall, shoulders square, voice steady enough to carry. "Her name is Elias Kane," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "She's as much this land's daughter as any man here. And as of this morning she's mine, if she'll still have me." Aiyana froze where she stood, her eyes widening. Not from surprise, but from the quiet recognition of a truth that had already been growing wordless between them. The crowd didn't clap. They only stared, but in that silence something shifted. Not approval, not welcome, but respect, the kind that can't be begged for, only earned. That evening, the sky burned orange and gold, the kind of sunset that made the desert look forgiving. Elias found her near the corral, watching the horizon as if waiting for the world to decide what it would do with her. He approached slow, hands empty. "You shouldn't have had to save me," he said. "Not again. Maybe it wasn't saving, she said softly. Maybe it was just remembering. He took a deep breath, voice trembling like an old fence in wind. You know what I've done, Aiyana. The men I rode with. The fire that took your people. I know, she said before he could finish. Her gaze didn't falter. And I know that you carried the guilt like a man dying of thirst beside a full canteen. She reached out her bandaged hand and touched his chest, just over his heart. You saved me not because you were pure, Elias Kane, but because you still could be. That's the difference. He couldn't speak. Tears, hot, reluctant, stung his eyes. You came here, he whispered. To forgive me? She shook her head slowly. No. I came to love the part of you that never stopped trying. There was no preacher, no altar. Just the wind and the whisper of cottonwood leaves. They stood inside a circle of stones Aiyana had laid that morning. Not sacred to any church, but sacred all the same. Elias cut a strip from his bandana and tied it gently around her wrist. In this land, he said quietly, what's bound by dust is bound forever. Aiyana smiled, not wide but soft, the way sunrise touches water. Then let the wind be our witness. Their lips met in the fading light, slow and reverent. Not passion's blaze, but the kind of love that rises from ash and keeps its promise to endure. When they parted, she leaned her forehead to his and whispered, You don't have to be forgiven, Elias. You just have to keep growing something good from where it once burned. Years passed. The ranch healed. The flowers she planted grew wild around the well, roots deep in the same earth that once refused them. Children ran by the corral, their laughter echoing across the hills. Elias's hair silvered, his shoulders bent, but his eyes stayed kind. Aiyana still sang to the wind sometimes, soft songs the prairie now hummed back. When travelers came through asking about the ranch on the hill, townsfolk would nod and say, That's Kane's place, where the desert turned gentle. And when the nights grew long and quiet, Elias would sit on the porch, the stars heavy above him, her hand resting in his. He'd speak softly, not to her but to the wide silence around them, as if telling a story to whoever might be listening. If you ever find yourself alone in this world, he'd say, voice low, steady, remember, you can start again even in the ash. Maybe kindness finds you once, when you don't deserve it. If it does, hold it close. And when you're strong enough, go back for it. He looked to the horizon then, where the desert met the dusk, and smiled like a man who'd finally forgiven the sky for being so wide. Aiyana leaned her head against his shoulder, eyes closed. The wind sighed through the sagebrush like an old lullaby, carrying their story out into the vastness. Some loves, she murmured half asleep, don't burn bright. They just never go out. Final reflection, narrative voice to the reader. If this desert has a lesson, it's that redemption doesn't ride in on thunder. It walks on bare feet, slow and certain, through the dust of every mistake you've made. Sometimes love isn't what saves you. It's what stays long enough to teach you how to save yourself. And there, beneath the endless sky, two souls stood where truth stood tall. The land at last remembered peace.